Soon you will have forgotten all things, and soon all things will have forgotten you. It is peculiar to man to love even those who do him wrong. This happens if when they do wrong you remember they are kinsmen, and wrong you through ignorance and unintentionally, and soon both of you will die. Above all, that the wrongdoer has done you no harm, for he has not made your mind worse than it was before. The universal nature out of the universal substance, as if it were wax, now molds a horse. When it has broken this up, it uses the material for a tree, then for a man, then for something else, and each of these things lasts for a very short time. But it is no hardship for the vessel to be broken up, as there was none for it to be fastened together. A scowling look is quite unnatural. When one often assumes it, the result is that all one's comeliness fades, and at last is so completely extinguished that it cannot again be lighted up at all. Look to conclude from this that scowls are contrary to reason. For if all knowledge of doing wrong is lost, what reason is there for living any longer? Nature, that governs the whole, will soon change all things which you see, and out of their substance will make other things, and again other things from the substance of them, in order that the world may be ever new. When a man has done you any wrong, immediately consider with what notion of good and evil he acted in doing wrong. When you have seen this, you will pity him, and will neither wonder nor be angry. For either you think the same thing to be good that he does, or something of the same kind. It is your duty then to pardon him. But if you do not hold the same notions of good or evil, you will more readily be charitable to him who is in error. Think less of what you have not than of what you have. Of the things you have, select the best, then reflect how eagerly you would have labored for them if you had them not. At the same time, however, take care you do not, through being so pleased with them, accustom yourself to so overvalue them as to be distressed if ever you should lose them. Retire into yourself. The nature of the rational principle that rules us is to be content with itself when it does what is just, and so secures tranquility. Subdue the imagination. Check the drives of impulse. Confine your care to the present. Understand well what happens to you and to others. Divide and distribute every object between its casual and its material elements. Think of your last hour. Let the harm done by another man stay where the harm was done. Pay attention to what is being said. Let your understanding keep pace with what is being done and the causes of it. Adorn yourself with simplicity and modesty, and with indifference towards the things which are neither good nor bad. Love mankind. Follow God. The poet says that law rules all. It is enough to remember that law rules all. As for death, whether it is a dispersion, or a dissolution into atoms, or annihilation, it is either extinction or change. As for pain, a pain that is intolerable carries us off, but that which lasts a long time is bearable. The mind maintains its own tranquility by retiring into itself, and the ruling faculty is not injured. As for the parts which are hurt by the pain, let them, if they can, give their opinion of it. As for fame, look at the minds of those who seek fame. Observe what they are, and what kind of things they avoid, and what kind of things they pursue. And consider that as one heap of sand piled on another hides the sand of the first, so in life an earlier exploit is soon covered by those which come after. A saying of Plato: "A man with a lofty mind, who takes a view of all time and all substance, Can he, do you suppose, regard human life as anything great? Not possibly. Such a man will think, too, that death is no evil. Certainly not. From Antisthenes: "It is a royal thing to do good and to be abused. To have a countenance obedient, regulated, and composed, as the mind commands, and a mind not regulated and composed by itself, is a base thing. It is not right to vex ourselves at things, for they care naught about us. To the immortal gods and us give joy. Life must be reaped like the ripe ears of corn. One man is born, another dies. If gods care not for me and for my children, there is a reason for it. For the good is with me, and the just. No joining with others in their wailing, no violent emotion." From Plato: "But I would make this man a sufficient answer, which is this: you are wrong if you think a man who is good for anything at all should count over the hazards of life or death, and should not rather look to this only in all he does, whether what he is doing is just or unjust, and the work of a good or a bad man. For this, men of Athens, is the truth. Wherever a man has taken his stand, thinking it the best place for him, or has been stationed by his commander, there, in my opinion, he ought to stay and abide the hazard, reckoning nothing, either death or anything else, worse than the baseness of deserting his post. But, my good friend, consider whether nobility and goodness are not something different from saving and being saved. For we must not allow that they consist of living such or such a time, at least for one who is really a man, nor should he be fond of life, but entrusting it to God, believing what the women say, that no man can escape his destiny, and he should next inquire how best he may live the time he has to live. Follow the courses of the stars, as if you were going along with them, and consider constantly the changes of the elements into one another. For such thoughts purge away the filth of this earthly life." This is a fine saying of Plato, that he who discourses of men should look at earthly things as if he viewed them from some higher place, should look at them in their assemblies, armies, labors on the soil, their marriages, treaties, births and deaths, the noise of the courts of justice, the desert places, the various nations of barbarians, the feasts, lamentations, markets, the mixture of all things, and orderly combination of contraries. Consider the past, the great shifts in political supremacy. You may foresee also the things which will be, for they will certainly keep the same form. They cannot possibly deviate from the order in which they take place now. Accordingly, to have contemplated human life for 40 years is the same as to have contemplated it for 10,000 years. For what more will you see? What has grown from the earth goes back to the earth, but what has sprung from heavenly seed back to the heavenly realms returns. This means either a dissolution of intertwining atoms, or a similar dispersion of unfeeling elements. With food and drinks and cunning magic arts, turning the channel's course to escape from death, the breeze which heaven has sent we must endure, and toil without complaining. Another may be more expert in thwarting his opponent, but he is not more social, nor more modest, nor better disciplined to meet all that happens, nor more considerate to the faults of his neighbors. Where every act must be performed in accord with the reason which is common to gods and men, we have nothing to fear. When we can profit by activity which is successful and in harmony with our nature, we need suspect no harm. Everywhere and at all times it is in your power to accept reverently your present condition, to behave justly to those about you, and to exert your skill to control your thoughts, that nothing shall steal into them without being well examined. Look not around to discover other men's motives, but look straight to what nature leads you, both universal nature, through the things that befall you, and your own nature, through the acts you are compelled to do. Every being must do what its constitution requires, and all other things have been constituted to serve rational beings, just as among irrational things the inferior exists for the sake of the superior, and things with reason exist for the sake of one another. The primary principle, then, in man's constitution is the social. The second is not to yield to the temptations of the body, for it is the peculiar mark of the rational and intelligent agent to set its own bounds and never to be overpowered by the activity either of the senses or the appetites, for both are animal. But the intelligent agent claims superiority and does not permit itself to be overpowered by the others. With good reason, for it is formed by nature to make use of all the rest. The third mark of a rational constitution is freedom from error and deception. Let your mind hold fast to these things and go straight on, and it has what is its own. Consider yourself to be dead, and to have completed your life up to the present time. Then live out according to nature the remainder which is allowed you. Love only that which happens to you, and is woven with the thread of your destiny, for what is more suited to your needs? Whatever happens, keep before your eyes those who have borne the same things, how they were vexed and grieved and full of complaining. And now where are they? Nowhere. Then why do you choose to act in the same way? Why do you not leave these agitations, which are foreign to your nature, to those who cause them, or are moved by them? Why are you not wholly intent on making the right use of your misfortunes? For if you will use them well, they will be a material for you to work on. Only attend to yourself, and resolve to be a good man in every act, remembering that that on which the act is based is in itself indifferent. Dig within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig. The body ought to be controlled, and to avoid contortion in motion or attitude. For what the mind shows in the face by maintaining the expression of intelligence and propriety, that ought to be required in the whole body also. But all these things should be observed without affectation. Life is more like wrestling than dancing, in that it should stand ready and firm to meet onsets, however unexpected. Always be sure whose approbation it is you wish to secure, and what ruling principles they have. Then you will neither blame those who offend involuntarily, nor will you want their approbation, if you look to the sources of their opinions and appetites. No soul, says the philosopher, voluntarily deprives itself of truth, or of justice, temperance, benevolence, or of any other good thing. It is most necessary to bear this constantly in mind, for thus you will be more gentle towards all. In every pain remind yourself that there is no dishonor in it, nor does it impair your governing intelligence. It does not damage it either in its rational or social aspects. Indeed, in the case of most pains, let this remark of Epicurus aid you, that pain is neither intolerable nor everlasting, if you bear in mind that it has its limits, and if you add nothing to it in imagination, and remember this too, that we do not perceive that many things which are disagreeable to us are the same as pain, such as excessive drowsiness, and being feverish, and having no appetite. When you are discontented about any of these things, say to yourself that you are yielding to pain. Take care not to feel toward the inhuman, as human beings too often feel toward each other. How do we know that Talauges was not superior in character to Socrates? For it is not enough that Socrates died a more noble death, and disputed more skillfully with the sophists, and spent the night in the cold with more endurance, and that when he was bid to arrest Leon of Salamis, he considered it more noble to refuse, and that he walked in a swaggering way in the streets, though, as to this one fact, one doubts if it was true. But we ought to inquire what kind of a soul it was that Socrates possessed, and if he was able to be content with being just towards men, and reverent towards the gods, neither idly vexed on account of men's villainy, nor yet making himself a slave to any man's ignorance, nor receiving as strange anything that fell to his share, nor enduring it as intolerable, nor allowing his understanding to be affected by the ills of the miserable flesh. Nature has so mingled the intelligence with the composition of the body as to have allowed you the power of self-determination, and of bringing under subjection all that is your own. It is very possible to be godlike and to be recognized as such by no one. Always bear this in mind, and also that very little indeed is necessary for a happy life. And because you have despaired of becoming a dialectician, and skilled in the knowledge of nature, do not for this reason renounce the hope of being both free and modest, and social and obedient to God. It is in your power to live free from all compulsion, and in the greatest tranquility of mind, even if all the world cry out against you as much as they choose, and even if wild beasts tear you limb from limb. For what hinders the mind, in the midst of all this, from being tranquil and truly judging all surrounding things, and readily using the material presented to it, so that the judgment may say to the thing which falls under its observation, "This you are in reality," though in the opinion of men you may appear to be of a different kind. And use may say to opportunity, "You are the thing I was seeking," for whatever presents itself is material for virtue, both rational and political, and, in a word, for the exercise of art, which belongs to man or God. Everything which happens has a relationship either to God or man, and is neither new nor difficult to handle, but familiar and fit matter to work on. The perfection of moral character consists in this, in passing every day as the last, and in being neither violently excited, nor torpid, nor hypocritical. The immortal gods are not vexed because they must tolerate men as they are, and so many of them bad. Still they take care of them in all ways. But you, who are destined to end so soon, are you weary of enduring the bad, and this too, when you are one of them? It is a ridiculous thing for a man not to fly from his own wickedness, which is indeed possible, but to fly from other men's wickedness, which is impossible. Whatever the rational and social faculty finds to be neither reasonable nor social, it correctly judges to be inferior to itself. When you have done a good act, and another has received it, why do you still want something more, as fools do, either to have the credit for a good act or the recompense? No one tires of receiving what is useful, but it is useful to act according to nature, Do not then tire of receiving what is useful by doing what is useful to others. The nature of the all moved to make a world of order. Either everything that takes place follows by way of consequence, or the movements are governed by no rational principle. If you remember this, it will make you more tranquil in many things. 8. This may help to keep you from vainglory, that you cannot claim to have lived the whole of your life, or even from your youth upward, as a philosopher, but both to others and to yourself it is plain that you are far from philosophy. You have fallen into confusion, then, so that it is no longer easy for you to get the reputation of a philosopher. If, then, you have truly seen what the facts are, never mind what others think of you, and be content to live the rest of your life as nature wills. Observe, then, what it wills, and let nothing else distract you, for you have experienced many wanderings without having found happiness anywhere. Where is happiness, then? In doing what man's nature requires. How, then, shall a man do this? By having principles from which come his affections and his acts. What principles? Those which relate to good and bad, the belief that there is nothing good for man which does not make him just, temperate, manly, free, and that there is nothing bad which does not produce opposite results. Of every action ask yourself, what does this mean to me? Shall I repent it? A little time, and I am dead, and all is gone. What more do I seek, if what I am now doing is the work of an intelligent and social being, and one who is under the same law with God? Alexander and Caesar and Pompey, what are they in comparison with Diogenes and Heraclitus and Socrates? For the latter were acquainted with things, and their causes, and their matter, and the ruling principles of these men were the same. But as to the former, how much foresight did they have, and to how many things were they slaves? Remember that men will go on doing the same things even if you should burst in protest. This is the chief thing. Do not be perturbed, for all things are according to the law of nature, and in a little time you will be nobody and nowhere, like Hadrian and Augustus. In the next place, keep your eyes fixed steadily on your business, remembering it is your duty to be a good man, and do what a man's nature demands without turning aside, and speak as it seems to you most just. Only let it be with a good temper, and with modesty, and without hypocrisy. Nature has this work to do, to shift and to change, to remove from here, and to carry there. All things are change, yet we need not fear anything new. All things are familiar, and even the distribution of them also remains the same. Every nature is contented with itself when it goes on its way well, and a rational nature goes on its way well when, in its thoughts, it assents to nothing false or uncertain, when it directs its movements to social acts only, when it confines its desires and aversions to the things which are in its power, and when it is satisfied with everything that is assigned to it by the common nature. For of this common nature every particular nature is a part, as the nature of the leaf is a part of the nature of the plant, except that in the plant the nature of the leaf is part of a nature which has not perception or reason, and is subject to impediments. But the nature of man is part of a nature which is not subject to impediment, and is intelligent and just, since it gives to everything in equal portions, and according to its worth, times, substance, cause, activity, and incident. Only do not look for exact equality between individual and individual, but take all the parts of one thing together, and compare them with all parts taken together of another. You have no time or opportunity to read and to know everything, but you do have time and opportunity to check arrogance, to be superior to pleasure and pain and love of fame, and not to be vexed at stupid and ungrateful people, and even to care for them. Let no man hear you finding fault with court life or with your own. Repentance is a kind of self-reproof for having neglected something useful, for that which is good must be something useful, and the good man's object in life. But no good man would ever repent of having refused any sensual pleasure. Pleasure, therefore, is neither good nor useful. Of each particular thing ask, what is it in itself, in its own constitution? What is its substance and material? And what is its casual nature? And what is it doing in the world? And how long will it abide? When you rise from sleep with reluctance, remember that it is in accord with your constitution and with human nature to perform social acts, but sleeping is common also to irrational animals, and that which belongs to the individual nature is more proper and pleasing to it. Constantly, if possible, as every impression presents itself, consider its real nature and proper qualities, and reason with yourself about it. Whatever man you meet with, immediately say to yourself, what are his principles of good and bad? For if with respect to pleasure and pain, and the causes of each, and with respect to fame and dishonor, death and life, he has such and such opinions, it will seem nothing wonderful or strange to me if he does such and such things, and I shall bear in mind that he is compelled to do so. Imagine being surprised that a fig tree produces figs, or if the world produces such and such things, and shame to the physician who is surprised that a man has a fever, and to the helmsman if the wind is unfavorable. Remember that to change your opinion and to follow him who corrects your error is not a surrender of freedom. Your action follows your own judgment and understanding, and keeps the course your mind has set. If a fault is in your own power to correct, why do you persist in it? But if in the power of another, whom do you blame, the atoms or the gods? Both are foolish. You must blame nobody. For if you can, correct the cause, but if you cannot do this, correct at least the thing itself. If you cannot even do this, what purpose is served by finding fault? For nothing should be done without a purpose. That which has died does not drop out of the universe. If it stays here, it also changes here, and is dissolved into its proper parts, which are elements of the universe and of yourself, and these two change, and murmur not. Everything exists for some end, a horse, a vine. Why do you wonder? Even the sun will say, I am for some purpose, and the rest of the gods will say the same. For what purpose, then, are you? To enjoy pleasure? Does reason allow this? Nature has regard in everything no less to the end than to the beginning and the continuance, just like the man who throws up a ball. What good is it, then, for the ball to be thrown up, or harm for it to come down, or even to lie fallen? And what good is it to the bubble while it holds together, or what harm when it has burst? The same may be said of a candle also. Turn a thing inside out and see what it is, and what kind of a thing it becomes when it has grown old, or is diseased, or in decay. Short-lived are both the praiser and the praised, the rememberer and the remembered, and this is but a corner of this part of the world, and not even here do all agree, no, not anyone with himself, and the whole world, too, is a point in the universe. Attend to the matter which is before you, whether it is an opinion, or an act, or a word. You get what you deserve, for you choose rather to become good tomorrow than to be good today. Am I doing anything? I do it with reference to the good of mankind. Does anything happen to me? I take what comes, referring all to the gods and the source of all things, from which all that happens is derived. As bathing appears to you to be oil, sweat, dirt, filthy water, all things disgusting, so is every part of life and every material thing. Lucilla saw Verus die, and then Lucilla died. Secunda saw Maximus die, and then Secunda died. Epitincanus saw Diotimus die, and then Epitincanus died. Antoninus saw Faustina die, and then Antoninus died. And so on, first Hadrian, then Sailor. And those sharp-witted men, either seers or men inflated with pride, where are they? For instance, Carax, Demetrius the Platonist, and Eudaemon, and anyone else like them, all ephemeral, dead long ago. Some indeed have not been remembered even for a short time, and others have become the heroes of fables, and still others have disappeared even from fables. Remember this, then, that this little compound, yourself, must either be dissolved, or your poor breath must be extinguished, or be removed and placed elsewhere. It is satisfaction to a man to do the proper work of a man. Now it is a proper work of a man to be benevolent to his own kind, to despise the movements of the senses, to form a just judgment of plausible appearances, and to survey the nature of the universe and of the things which happen in it. Man has three relations, the one to the body which surrounds him, the second to the divine cause from which all things come to all, and the third to those who live with him. Pain is either an evil to the body, and in that case let the body say what it thinks of it, or to the soul, but it is in the power of the soul to maintain its own serenity and tranquility, and refuse to view it as an evil. For every judgment and movement and desire and aversion is within, and no evil can penetrate there. Wipe out fancies by often saying to yourself, "Now it is in my power to allow no evil in my soul, nor desire, nor perturbation. But looking at all things, I see what is their proper nature, and I use each according to its value. Remember this power which you have from nature. Speak both in the Senate and to every man, whoever he may be, appropriately, not with any affectation. Use plain language. Augustus' court, wife, daughter, descendants, ancestors, sister Agrippa, kinsmen, intimates, friends, Aurelius, Maecenas, physicians and sacrificing priests, the whole court is dead. Then turn to the rest, not considering the death of a single man, but of a whole race, like the Pompeians, and the words which are engraved upon tombs, the last of his race. Then consider what trouble those before them have had, that they might leave a successor, and that of necessity someone must be the last, and then finally the death of a whole race. It is your duty to order your life well in every single act, and if every act does its duty as far as possible, be content, and no one can prevent that. But some external obstacle might stand in the way, you say. Nothing will stand in the way of your acting justly, soberly, and considerately. But may not some form of action be prevented? Possibly, but by acquiescing in the hindrance and by being content to adopt that alternative, another opportunity of action is immediately put before you in place of that which was prevented, and one which will fit into the whole of which we are speaking. Receive wealth or prosperity without arrogance, and be ready to let it go cheerfully. If you ever saw a hand cut off, or a foot, or a head lying anywhere apart from the rest of the body, this is what a man does with himself who is not content with what happens, and separates himself from others, or does anything unsocial. Suppose that you have detached yourself from the natural unity, for you were made by nature apart, but now you have cut yourself off. Yet here there is this beautiful provision, that it is in your power again to reunite with it. God has allowed this to no other part, after it has been separated and cut asunder, to come together again. But consider the benevolence by which he has distinguished man, for he has put it in his power not to be separated at all from the universal. And when he has been separated, he has allowed him to return, and to be united, and to resume his place as a part. As the nature of the universal has given to every rational being all the other powers that it has, so we have received from it this power also. For as the universal nature converts and fixes in its predestined place everything which stands in the way and opposes it, and makes such things a part of itself, so also the rational animal is able to make every hindrance into his own instrument, and to use it to further his endeavor. Do not disturb yourself by thinking of the whole of your life. Let not your thoughts at once embrace all the various troubles which you may expect to befall you. But on every occasion ask yourself, what is there in this which is intolerable and past bearing? For you will be ashamed to confess. In the next place, remember that neither the future nor the past pains you, but only the present. But this is reduced to a very little if you only circumscribe it, and scold yourself if you are unable to bear even this. Does Panthea or Pergamus now sit by the tomb of Verus? Does Scaurius or Diotimus sit by the tomb of Hadrian? That would be ridiculous. Well, suppose they did sit there. Would the dead be conscious of it? And if conscious, would they be pleased? And if pleased, would that make them immortal? Was it not in the order of destiny that these persons too should become old women and old men, and then die? And when they died, what would their lovers do? All comes to foul smell and corruption in the end. If you are sharp-sighted, see and judge wisely, says the philosopher. In the constitution of the rational animal I see no virtue which is opposed to justice, but I see a virtue which is opposed to love of pleasure, and that is temperance. If you take away your opinion about what seems to give you pain, you yourself stand in perfect security. You ask, who is this self? The reason. But I am not reason. Be it so. Then let reason not trouble itself. But if any other part of you suffers, let it keep its suffering to itself. Hindrance to the perceptions of sense is an evil to the animal nature. Hindrance to the impulses is equally an evil to the animal nature. And something else also is equally an impediment and an evil to the constitution of plants. So that which is a hindrance to the intelligence is an evil to the intelligent nature. Apply all these things, then, to yourself. Does pain or sensuous pleasure affect you? The senses will look to that. Has any obstacle opposed you in your efforts towards an object? If, indeed, you were making this effort without any reservation, certainly this obstacle is an evil to you as a rational animal. But if you accept the usual course of things, you have not yet been injured or even impeded. The things, however, which are proper to the understanding, no one may impede, for neither fire, nor iron, nor tyrant, nor abuse touches it in any way. When it has been made a sphere, it continues a sphere. It is not fitting that I should give myself pain, for I have never intentionally given pain even to another. Different things delight different people. It is my delight to keep the ruling faculties sound without turning away either from any man or from any of the things which happen to men, but looking at and receiving all with welcome eyes, and using everything according to its value. Lay hold securely upon this present time, for those who prefer to pursue posthumous fame do not consider that the men of aftertime will be exactly like those they cannot bear now, and both are mortal. And what does it matter to you what these men say, or what opinion they hold about you? Take me and cast me where you will, for there I shall keep my divine part tranquil, that is, content, if it can feel and act in harmony with its proper constitution. Is this change of place sufficient reason why my soul should be unhappy and worse than it was, by cringing or craving, cowering or flinching? What indeed is worth that? Nothing can happen to any man which is not a human accident, nor to an ox which is not according to the nature of an ox, nor to a vine, nor to a stone, that is not according to the nature of each. Why should you complain if what is usual and natural happens to each thing? Nature brings nothing that you cannot bear. If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing which disturbs you, but your own judgment about it. It is in your power to wipe out that judgment now. But if anything in your own disposition gives you pain, who hinders you from correcting the principle at fault? And even if you are pained because you are not doing some particular thing which seems to you to be right, why do you not rather act than complain? Some insuperable obstacle is in the way. Do not be grieved, then, for the cause of its not being done depends not on you. But it is not worth while to live if this cannot be done. Take your departure from life contentedly, then, dying just as he dies, who is in full activity and well pleased with the things which are obstacles. Remember that the ruling faculty is invincible when once it rallies. If it does nothing which it does not choose to do, even if it resist from mere obstinacy, how much more, then, when its judgment is rational and made with deliberation? Therefore the mind which is free from passions is a citadel, for a man has nothing more secure to which he can fly for refuge, and be impregnable. He, then, who has not seen this is an ignorant man, but he who has seen it, and does not fly to this refuge, is unhappy. Do not draw inferences in excess of what first appearances report. Suppose it has been reported to you that a certain person speaks ill of you. This has been reported, but that you have been injured, that has not been reported. I see that my child is sick, that I see, but that he is in danger I do not see. Thus always abide by the first appearances, and add nothing to them from within, and then you are unaffected. Or rather add this, the recognition that everything which happens is a part of the world order. A cucumber is bitter. Throw it away. There are briars in the path. Turn aside from them. This is enough. Do not add, "And why were such things put into the world?" For you will be ridiculed by a man who is acquainted with nature, as you would be ridiculed by a carpenter and a shoemaker if you found fault because you found shavings and cuttings in their workshop from the things which they make. And yet they have places where they can throw these shavings and cuttings, but nature has no external space. Now, the wondrous part of her art is that, though she has circumscribed herself, everything within her which appears to decay and grow old, and be useless, she changes into herself, and again makes new things from these very same, so that she requires neither substance from without, nor wants a place into which she may cast that which decays. She is content, then, with her own space, and her own matter, and her own art. Neither in your actions be sluggish, nor in your conversation without method, nor wandering in thought, nor let there be in your soul either inward contention or external effusion, nor in life be so busy as to have no leisure. Suppose men kill you, cut you in pieces, curse you. What can these things do to prevent your mind from remaining pure, wise, sober, just? For instance, if a man should stand by a limpid, pure spring and curse it, the spring does not stop sending up pure water, and if he should cast dirt and filth into it, it will speedily disperse them and wash them out, and will not be at all polluted. How then shall you possess a perpetual fountain? By imbuing yourself hourly with freedom, benevolence, simplicity, and modesty. He who does not know what the world is, does not know where he is, and he who does not know for what purpose the world exists, does not know who he is or what the world is. But he who has failed in any one of these things could not even say for what purpose he exists himself. What then do you think of him who seeks the praise of those who applaud, of men who know not where they are or who they are? Do you wish to be praised by a man who curses himself thrice every hour? Would you wish to please a man who does not please himself? Does a man please himself who repents of nearly everything that he does? Do not let your breathing only act in concert with the air which surrounds you, but let your intelligence also now be in harmony with the intelligence which embraces all things. For the mind power is diffused in all parts and pervades all things for him who is willing to draw it to him, just as the atmosphere is for him who is able to breathe it. Generally, wickedness does no harm at all to the universe, and particularly the wickedness of one man does no harm to another. It is only harmful to him who has it in his power to be released from it as soon as he wills. To my own free will, the free will of my neighbor is just as indifferent as his breath and his flesh. For though we are made especially for the sake of one another, still the ruling power of each of us has its own office. For otherwise my neighbor's wickedness would be my harm, which God has not willed, in order that my happiness may not depend on another. The sun appears to be poured down and diffused in all directions, and yet it is not exhausted, for this diffusion is extension. Accordingly, its rays are called extensions because they are extended. But one may judge what kind of a thing a ray is if he looks at the sun's light through a narrow opening in a darkened room, for it is extended in a straight line, and as it were divided when it meets with a solid body which stands in the way and intercepts the air beyond. But there the light remains fixed, and does not glide or fall off. Such then ought to be the outpouring and diffusion of the understanding, and it should make no violent or impetuous collision with the obstacles in its way, nor yet fall down, but be fixed, and enlighten that which receives it. For a body will deprive itself of light if it does not admit it. He who fears death either fears the loss of sensation, or a different kind of sensation. But if you have no sensation, neither will you feel any harm, and yet if you acquire another kind of sensation, you will be a different kind of being, and you will not cease to live. Men exist for the sake of one another. Teach them then, or bear with them. An arrow moves in one way, the mind in another. The mind, indeed, even when it moves cautiously and plays inquiringly around a subject, is nevertheless moving straight on toward its goal. enter into every man's ruling faculty, and also let every man enter into yours. 9. He who acts unjustly acts irreverently. For since the universal nature has made rational animals for the sake of one another, to help one another according to their worth, but in no way to injure one another, he who transgresses her will is clearly guilty of impiety towards the highest divinity. And he too who lies is guilty of impiety to the same divinity. For the universal nature is the nature of all things that are, and all things that are have a relation to all things that come into existence. And further, this universal nature is named truth, and is the prime cause of all things that are true. He then who lies intentionally is guilty of impiety inasmuch as he acts unjustly by deceiving, and he also who lies unintentionally, inasmuch as he is at variance with the universal nature, and inasmuch as he disturbs the order by fighting against the nature of the world. For he fights against it, who is moved of himself to that which is contrary to truth. For through neglect of the powers received from nature, he can no longer distinguish falsehood from truth. And indeed he who pursues pleasure as good, and avoids pain as evil, is guilty of impiety. For of necessity such a man must often find fault with the universal nature, alleging that it assigns things to the bad and the good contrary to their deserts, because frequently the bad are in the enjoyment of pleasure, and possess the things which procure pleasure, but the good have pain for their share, and the things which cause pain. And further, he who is afraid of pain will sometimes also be afraid of some of the things which will happen in the world, and even this is impiety. And he who pursues pleasure will not abstain from injustice, and this is plainly a sinful act. Now, with respect to the things toward which the universal nature is equally affected, for it would not have made both unless it was equally affected towards both, towards these, they who wish to follow nature should be of the same mind and equally affected. With respect to pain, then, and pleasure, or death and life, honor or dishonor, which the universal nature employs equally, whoever is not equally affected is manifestly guilty of sin. And I say that the universal nature employs them equally, instead of saying that they happen alike to those who are produced in continuous series, and to those who come after them by virtue of a certain original movement of providence, according to which it moved from a certain beginning to this ordering of things, having conceived certain reasons of the things which were to be, and having determined the generative power of substances, and changes, and such-like successions. It would be a man's happiest lot to depart from mankind without having had any taste of lying and hypocrisy, and luxury, and pride. However, to breathe one's last when one has had enough of these is the next best thing. Have you determined to stick to vice, and has not experience yet induced you to flee this pestilence? For the destruction of the understanding is a pestilence, much more indeed than any such corruption in the air about us. For this corruption is a pestilence of animals, in so far as they are animals, but the other is a pestilence of men, in so far as they are men. Do not despise death, but be well content with it, since this too is one of those things which nature wills. For such as it is to be young and to grow old, and to increase and to reach maturity, and to have teeth and beard and gray hairs, and to beget, and to be pregnant, and to bring forth, such also is dissolution. This, then, is consistent with the character of a reflecting man, to be neither careless, nor impatient, nor contemptuous with respect to death, but to wait for it as one of the operations of nature, As you now wait for the time when the child shall come out of your wife's womb, so be ready for the time when your soul shall fall out of this envelope. But if you require also a vulgar kind of comfort which shall reach your heart, you will be best reconciled to death by observing the objects from which you are going to be removed, and the morals of those with whom your soul will no longer be mingled. For it is not your right to be offended with men, but it is your duty to care for them, and to bear with them gently, and yet to remember that your departure will be not from men who have the same principles as yourself. For this is the only thing, if there be any, which could draw us the contrary way and attach us to life, to be permitted to live with those who have the same principles as ourselves. But now you see how great is the trouble arising from the discordance of those who live together, so that you may say, Come quick, O death, lest perchance I too should forget myself. He who does wrong against himself. He who acts unjustly to himself, because he makes himself bad. Not only he who does, but he who fails to do a certain thing, acts wrongly. Your present opinion founded on understanding, and your present conduct directed to social good, and your present disposition of contentment with everything which happens, that is enough. Wipe out fancy, check desire, extinguish appetite, keep your ruling faculty in control. Among irrational animals, one life is distributed, but among rational animals one intelligent soul is distributed, just as there is one earth for all things which are of an earthy nature. And we see by one light, and breathe one air, all of us that have the faculty of vision, and all that have life. All things which share a common element move towards that which is of the same kind with themselves. Everything which is earthy turns towards the earth. Everything which is liquid flows together, and everything which is of an aerial kind does the same, so that they require the application of force to keep them apart. Fire, indeed, moves upwards on account of the elemental fire, and so ready it is to be kindled with all fire that every substance which is somewhat dry is easily ignited, because there is less mingled with it, that is, a hindrance to ignition. Accordingly, everything also which participates in the common intelligent nature moves in like manner towards that which is of the same kind, or moves even more. For so much as it is superior in comparison with all other things, in the same degree also is it more ready to mingle with and to be fused with its counterpart. Among animals devoid of reason we find swarms of bees and herds of cattle, and the nurture of young birds, all manifestations of love. For even in animals there are souls, and that power which brings them together is seen to exert itself in the superior degree, and in such a way as never has been observed in plants, or in stones, or in trees. But among rational animals there are political communities and friendships, and families and meetings of people, and in wars, treaties, and armistices. But in the things which are still superior, even though they are separated from one another, unity in a manner exists, as in the stars. Thus the ascent to the higher degree is able to produce a sympathy even in things which are separated. See, then, what now takes place. For only intelligent animals have now forgotten this mutual desire and inclination, and in them alone the flowing together is not seen. But though men strive to avoid this union, they are caught and held by it, for their nature is too strong for them. And you will see what I say, if you only observe. Sooner, then, will one find anything earthy which comes in contact with no earthy thing than a man altogether separated from other men. Both man and God and the universe produce fruit at the proper season, It matters not that usage has especially affixed these terms to the vine and like things. Reason produces fruit both for all and for itself, and there are produced from it other things of the same kind as reason itself. If you are able, correct by teaching those who do wrong. But if you cannot, remember that charity is given you for this purpose. And the gods, too, extend charity to such persons, helping them attain health, wealth, reputation, so kind they are. And it is in your power also. Who hinders you? Labor not as one who is wretched, nor yet as one who would be pitied or admired, but direct your will to one thing only, to put yourself in motion, and to check yourself as the social law requires. Today I have got out of all trouble, or rather, I have cast out all trouble, for it was not outside, but within, in my opinions. All things are the same, familiar, ephemeral, worthless. Everything now is just as it was in the time of those whom we have buried. Things stand outside of us, just as they are, neither knowing aught of themselves, nor expressing any judgment. What is it, then, which does judge for them? The ruling faculty. Not in passivity, but in activity lies the evil and the good of the rational social animal, just as his virtue and his vice lie not in passivity, but in activity. For the stone which has been thrown up, it is no evil to come down, nor indeed any good to have been carried up. Penetrate inward into men's ruling principles, and you will see what judges you are afraid of, and how they judge themselves. All things are changing, and you yourself are in continuous mutation, and, in a manner, in continuous destruction, and the universe, too. It is your duty to leave another man's wrongful act where it is. The end of activity, cessation from movement and opinion, what may be termed their death, is no evil. Now consider your life, your childhood, youth, manhood, and old age, for here also every change was a death. Is this anything to fear? Turn your thoughts now to your life under your grandfather, then under your mother, then under your father, and you find many other differences, changes, and endings. Ask yourself, is this anything to fear? In like manner, then, neither are the end and surcease from life itself anything to fear. Hasten to examine your own ruling faculty, that of the universe and of your neighbor, your own, that you may make it just, that of the universe, that you may remember of what you are a part, that of your neighbor, that you may know whether he has acted ignorantly or with knowledge, and that you may also consider that his ruling faculty is akin to yours. As you yourself are a component part of a social system, so let every act of yours be a component part of social life. Whatever act of yours, then, has no reference either immediately or remotely to a social end, this tears asunder your life. Children's quarrels, their games, poor breath carrying about a corpse, are not the representations of the mansions of the dead, more solid and real. Examine into the essence of the form of an object, and detach it altogether from its material part, and then contemplate it. Then determine the full span which a thing of this peculiar form is naturally made to endure. You have borne infinite troubles through not being contented with your ruling faculty, when it does the things which it is constituted by nature to do. But enough. When another blames or hates you, or when men say injurious things about you, approach their poor souls, penetrate within, and see what kind of men they are. you will discover that there is no reason to take trouble that these men may have a good opinion of you. However, you must be well disposed towards them, for by nature they are friends. And the gods, too, aid them in all ways, by dreams, by signs, toward the attainment of their aims. The periodic movements of the universe, up and down and to and fro, continue from age to age, and either the universal intelligence imparts each separate impulse, in which case be content with the result of its activity, or it puts itself in motion once, and everything else comes by way of sequence, in a manner. Or indivisible elements are the origin of all things. In a word, if there is a God, all is well, and if chance rules, be not you too governed by it. Soon the earth will cover us all. Then the earth too will change, and the things which result from change will continue to change forever, and these again forever. For if a man reflects on the changes and transformations which follow one another wave upon wave, he will feel contempt for everything which is perishable. The universal cause is like a winter torrent. It carries everything along with it. But how worthless are all these poor people who are engaged in matters political, and, as they suppose, are playing the philosopher, all drivellers. Well then, man, do what nature now requires. Set yourself in motion, if it is in your power, and do not look about you to see if anyone is watching. Nor yet expect Plato's Republic, but be content if the smallest thing goes on well, and consider such an event to be no small matter. For who can change men's principles? And without a change of principles, what else is there than the slavery of men, who groan while they pretend to obey? Come now, and tell me of Alexander, and Philippus, and Demetrius, of Phalerum. They themselves shall judge whether they discovered what the common nature required, and behaved themselves accordingly. But if they acted like tragedy heroes, no one has condemned me to imitate them. Simple and modest is the work of philosophy. Draw me not aside to insolence and pride. Look down from above on the countless herds of man and their countless solemnities, and the infinitely varied voyagings and storms and calms, and the differences among those who are born, who live together, and die. And consider, too, the life lived by others in olden time, and the life of those who will live after you, and the life now lived among barbarous nations, and how many know not even your name, and how many will soon forget it, and how they who perhaps now are praising you will very soon blame you, and that neither a posthumous name is of any value, nor reputation, nor anything else. Let there be freedom from perturbation with respect to the things which come from external causes, and in actions whose cause lies in yourself. Be just. That is, let impulse and action terminate in social acts, for this is according to your nature. Clear from your mind the many useless things which disturb you, for they lie entirely in your opinion, and you will then gain for yourself ample space by comprehending the whole universe in your mind, and by contemplating the eternity of time, and observing the rapid change of each thing. How short is the time from its birth to its dissolution, and the illimitable time before its birth, as well as the equally boundless time after its dissolution. All that you see will quickly perish, and those who have been spectators of its dissolution will very soon perish too. And he who dies at the extremest old age will be brought into the same condition with him who died prematurely. What are the ruling principles of these men, and about what kind of things are they busy, and for what kind of reasons do they love and honor? Imagine that you see their poor souls laid bare. When they think that they do harm by their blame, or good by their praise, what an idea! Loss is nothing else than change. But the universal nature delights in change, and in obedience to her all things are now done well, and from eternity have been done in like form, and will be such through endless time. What then do they say? That all things have been, and all things always will be bad, and that no power has ever been found among all the gods to set them right, but the world has been condemned to be bound in never-ceasing evil? Decay is the material substance of all things, water, dust, bones, filth. What is marble but the callosities of the earth? Gold and silver are but sediments, garments only bits of hair, purple dye, shellfish blood, and everything else is of the same kind. And even the breath is a thing of the same kind, changing from this to that. Enough of this complaining and groaning and ape-like chatter. Why are you disturbed? What is there new in this? What unsettles you? Is it the form of the thing? Look at it. Or is it the matter? Look at it. Besides these, there is nothing. Towards the gods, then, now at last becomes simpler and better. It is the same whether we look at these things for 100 years or 3. If any man has done wrong, the harm is his, but perhaps he has not done wrong. Either all things proceed from one intelligent source and come together as in one body, and the part ought not to find fault with what is done for the benefit of the whole, or there are only atoms, and nothing else but mixture and dispersion. Why, then, are you disturbed? Say to the ruling faculty, are you dead, corrupted, playing the hypocrite? Are you a mere beast, chewing a cud? Either the gods have no power, or they have power. If they have no power, why do you pray to them? But if they have power, why do you not pray for deliverance from the fear, or the desire, or the pain, which a thing causes, rather than pray that any of these things should or should not happen? For certainly, if they can help at all, they can help to this end. But perhaps you will say that the gods have placed all that in my own power. Well, then, is it not better to use what is in your power like a free man, than to desire in a slavish and abject way what is not in your power? And who has told you that the gods do not aid us even in the things which are in our power? Begin then to pray for such things, and you will see. One man prays to be able to lie with a certain woman. Rather should he pray to be freed of desire for her. Another prays to be rid of his enemy. He should pray against wanting to be rid of him. Instead of praying that you may not lose your little one, pray for release from fear. Turn your prayers this way and see what comes. Epicurus says, in sickness my conversation was not about my bodily sufferings, nor did I talk on such subjects to those who visited me. But I continued to discourse on the nature of things as before, keeping to the main point, how the mind, while participating in such movements as go on in the poor flesh, shall be free from disturbance and maintain its proper good. Nor did I, he adds, give the physicians an opportunity of putting on solemn looks as if they were doing something great, but my life went on well and happily. Do then the same that he did, both in sickness, if you are sick, and in any other circumstances, for never to desert philosophy in any events that may befall us, and to keep from trifling talk with an ignorant man, or one unacquainted with nature, is a principle of all schools of philosophy. But be intent only on what you are now doing, and on the instrument by which you do it. When you are offended with any man's shameless conduct, immediately ask yourself, is it possible that there should be no shameless men in the world? It is not possible. Do not, therefore, require what is impossible. For this man is one of those shameless men who must be in the world. Similarly, in the case of the knave, the faithless, and every man who does any kind of wrong. When once you remember that it is impossible to do away with such men, you will become more kindly disposed toward everyone. It is also useful to perceive what virtue nature has given to man to cope with every wrongful act. As an antidote against the stupid man, she has given mildness, and against some other kind of man, some other power. And in all cases it is possible for you to correct by teaching the man who has gone astray. For every man who errs misses his object and is astray. Besides, what harm has he done you? For you will find that no one among those against whom you are irritated has done anything by which your mind could be made worse. And that which is to you evil and harmful has its foundation only in the mind. And what harm is done, or what is there strange, if the man who has not been instructed acts in the manner of an uninstructed one? Consider whether you should not blame yourself because you did not expect such a man to act in such a way. For reason has given you faculties, enabling you to foresee that he would commit this error, and yet you have forgotten and are amazed that he has done so. But most of all, when you blame a man as faithless or ungrateful, turn to yourself, for the fault is manifestly your own, if you trusted a man with such a disposition to keep his promise, or if, when conferring your kindness,